shoot. Uh, I just realized the mic isn't working. Hold on here. I don't actually have the mic in. One moment. Okay. Oh my god. There we go. All right. That's better. All right. Well, welcome to a new movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for filminquiry.com, TwinCitiesGeek.com, and movieswithmark.com. Had a little bit of technical issues there with the microphone. It's been a while since I plugged it back in. I've been like switching between USB ports. It's a technical problem. You don't need to hear about my crap. We're here to review movies, and we got a lot of big ones that we got to cover. So this is kind of like just like dipping my toes into the storm that is November, because it's going to pick up really fast here. So I figured I might as well, like, I was going to wait till next week, but I got to get to some big ones this week. So naturally, of course, the big one we got to talk about, we're going to talk about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, the Black Panther sequel that's coming out this weekend. We're also going to be talking about the Banshees of Inisherin, a new dramedy from Martin McDonough. I keep mispronouncing the name for some reason. Martin McDonough will be reviewing his film as well. Also be taking a look at Weird, the Al Yankovic film, which debuted on Roku last weekend. And we'll be taking a look at Luca Guadagnino's new film, Bones and All, a horror romance road trip movie. And this is just the tip of the iceberg for November. So like this is this is probably like the smallest one we're gonna, like, the next stream I do, it might be like 6 or 7 movies. Which, oh, I before I do next Indian movie. Ooh, man, I'll have to see what I can wedge in. I know there's at least like a few on Netflix that I should probably check out, because like at least through like Netflix and Prime, I always see there's like tons. And I know I should definitely cover some more just because there's so many, and there's always like one at the theater. But yeah, I'll have to search too. If you want, you can send me some recommendations, and I'll see if I can check them out. If they're on streaming, I'm more likely to check them out. But it's just that there's so much. There's even like small. I've got like a whole bunch of like Korean stuff that just came in too. So there's so much to cover in November. This is like this is pretty much like between like November, December. This is pretty much tax season. Like, so like I've got to get between like the festival films as well as the big blockbusters that come out. So yeah, let's we'll dig right into it. I will eventually cover more Indian films. Just that RRR popped up quickly on my radar, and I know everyone's saying like, oh, RRR is great, but there's all these other great Indian action films you should check out, which I definitely will. It's just like don't have much time for that, especially since like they're all like really good productions, but they're all like exceptionally long too. Like they're well over like 2 to 3 hours in there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that a lot going on with my time. So we got to got a lot of big movies and small movies to cover. Like I don't even cover like the much smaller independent films that go through my channel. So not because I don't like it, there's not that much time. Well, also because like if they're a bad film, I don't want to, give them bad press. Because if it's a small film, you don't want to bang down on the little guys. Indian films are of course pretty big, so I'll get to them eventually. All right, so let's get my notes up here so we can dig right into Black Panther. Wakanda Forever, the sequel. All right. I guess the cast list up here because I'm terrible pronouncing names, as most people will tell you. Let's get that up here. Okay, and I think we are ready to go in 3, 2, 1. So Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, is the sequel to 2018's Black Panther. And this is definitely a much anticipated sequel, but it's also probably the most intriguing for deciding where you go next with Black Panther and the Wakandan lore. And it's mostly just because Chadwick Boseman died, and so the big question became, well, what do you do with Black Panther 2? What do you do? Do you recast Chadwick Boseman in the role of T'Challa after his death? Do you address the death? Which route do you go with it? And who do you have take on the mantle of Black Panther as well? And I'm so glad that director Ryan Coogler found a way to just be very, very honest with this type of film and make it a very like emotionally moving piece that addresses Boseman's death and also develops a story around it as well. Like it feels a lot like, this is gonna sound like a weird comparison, but it felt like a lot when on Sesame Street they had Mr. Hooper, the character who played him died, and rather than like write him out of the show or recast him, they addressed his death and made it common and canon, and actually weaved it into a heartfelt story about life and loss. And it's very much the same thing with Wakanda Forever here. Wakanda Forever definitely, it addresses that T'Challa did die from a disease that they didn't get to in time, that it seems like he hid from there. So there's definitely a lot of like personal personal effects that are put into this film about, how much his death affected everyone. And in many ways, this is a little bit, I understand it's a little bit like tenuous, but it also kind of plays into how to develop a film in phase 4 of the MCU after, how do you follow up after like Avengers Endgame? And because after that film, it felt like it was such a culmination, then you got so much, and then where do you go from there? And that's very much what Wakanda Forever is about, is, what's the next route that you take? So like right away, I like the fact that it skips about like a year, like they address T'Challa's death, but then they go about a year later where Wakanda is now still struggling to, maintain their space on the international stage. They want to work with people, but they're not willing to open up to other nations that want to steal their vibranium, which of course they could do dangerous stuff with. And it seems like they're making the right call. Angela Bassett returns as Ramonda, who is the queen of Wakanda and now assumes the full duties of running it. But she's a little bit, she's hesitant, but she's still she's come to terms with her grief about T'Challa and tried to learn to move on and take on a position of leadership to basically continue leading her people and defending her people. Who hasn't moved on from his death is Shuri, played by Letitia Wright. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's the sister of T'Challa, and she hasn't gotten over his death. Like, there's a pretty blatant scene where it says, no, I'm not ready to move on yet. And it's one of those, she's in, that stage of grief where she's at, the denial portion, where she feels like she doesn't feel anything for his death, like she has moved on, that she doesn't have to think about it, but it is still weighing on her mind, and it is a part, of, the grieving process that she still has to process. Unfortunately, she has to process it really quick because there's a new problem with Wakanda. They're holding their own fine against outside forces, but then they have a new enemy on the horizon, which is Namor, who's played in the film by Tenoch Huerta. I'm going to mispronounce the name here, but I'm sorry. Tenoch Huerta Magia, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, the king of Talokan, which is an underwater kingdom that has remained hidden for all these years. And unfortunately, it's been unearthed when the CIA mucks about and, in their means of trying to find vibranium anywhere they can, they stumble upon this empire. and they get violent. Like the people who've lived there underwater, just they don't want to be seen and they don't want their vibranium touched. So they're much, much more violent. And you immediately see like an interesting parallel between like Wakanda and Talokan. So like both kingdoms, like they want to be protective. They're fearful of outsiders. They have a history of having experiences with slavery and colonizers that makes them very distant. So it seems like they would have like a good allyship. Of course, they have much different ideas of how to defend their territory. Wakanda has resorted more towards, non-violent takedowns so they can have prisoners to hold them accountable. Whereas Talokan, Talokan. I keep mispronouncing for some reason. Whereas with Talokan, they're very violent. They, like, if anyone gets anywhere near them, they want their secrets to remain secret, so they kill anybody who gets near them. And they actually have some pretty creative means of doing that. Like, they have the old-fashioned ways of just stabbing people with spears, and more creative ways, like using a bit of a siren song to manipulate them into drowning themselves in the ocean, which is pretty surreal. But like, there's a pretty horrific sequence where they show just how dangerous they can be. And Shuri and Namor end up clashing as like the representatives of their communities and showing like the many sides of what they're concerned about. Like, it's not just that Talokan is like the enemy that they've got to face here. As Shuri learns more about them, as she gets to learn Namor's history and his people, he gets to see that, they're not so different than us. It's just that they have different means of being protective, and those means might actually clash with Wakanda as well. So it presents this interesting idea of, what if Wakanda is presented with a similar kingdom that has like similar pathos and familiar problems to them, but how do they approach that? How can they have allyship if they do not trust each other and the wounds they have still haven't healed yet? And it plays a very interesting part in, like, how to come to terms with revenge, as well as realizing the emptiness of just trying to, like, strike back and kill all those who get in your way. And in terms of, like, its emotional core and its general themes, I feel like that works really well. Like, this is definitely a film that has its central focus on this aspect of legacy and vengeance and loss. And it has a firm focus. Like, I fully expected it to kind of like trip over its own heels in the third act, where it has to have that superhero fight sequence where everyone is fighting each other and there's explosions and killing and violence and all that. And thankfully it doesn't. It actually, like, I had a really good feeling going into the third act once we get to that climax, based on Shuri's motivations. It makes sense for, the route that they're going to take. It's like, oh, okay, there's definitely a big lesson that's going to be learned here, and I definitely looked forward to when it happened. Where I feel the film fumbles is, and everyone will admit this will be the biggest nitpick that everyone has with the film, it's overstuffed. It has so much going on, and so much of it, like, there are huge chunks of it that feel like they're diced up, and, like, they don't play as big a role. Like a key character who plays a little bit of a role, more or less as a negotiating pawn in this War of Kingdoms, is Riri Williams, played by Dominique Thorne. And at first, like, I was getting excited to see this character because, like, it felt like she was going to be the fish out of water, everyman character who was going to be able to react to everything with Talokan and Wakanda and just be, like, amazed and stunned by it and have these very human reactions, whereas, everyone in Wakanda and everyone in Talokan are very, they're very used to it. Like, the Wakandans are used to all this cool future tech, and the Talokans are used to underwater settings and these cool little aspects of their kingdom. So you'd think there'd be a lot more scenes with Riri reacting to that. And sadly, there's not as much. Like, there's a few scenes, and she definitely has some great chemistry with Shuri, and especially with Okoye, played by I'm gonna mispronounce her name again, with Denai Guerrera, and they have, like, the three of them have, like, perfect chemistry. That I love the fact that in the first act there's a whole chase sequence with just them, like, just like realizing they've been set up and trying to get ahead of the authorities. There's a real fun chase between them where they've got great back and forth. I wish there were more scenes like that, because it feels like like Riri doesn't have that much to do within this story, that she's kind of like diced up a lot more than I would like her to be. Especially when you get to the climax and it just kind of like it inexplicably just cuts around to show you like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, I remember Riri Williams in the comics. She's actually, Ironheart, a bit of the continuation of Iron Man. And she just kind of just like they do foreshadow her suit, but the way that they edit her into the climax is kind of like, oh yeah, Ironheart's here too, just in case you didn't know. Yeah, a little bit of a chaotic editing, and also probably the least involved character you have is Everett Ross, played by Martin Freeman, returning to the role, which like Ross is kind of like more of like a go-between character here. Like he's still like a good contact for Wakanda, especially with what's going on in the CIA, and for like about like I'd say like a little over half the film, it definitely has this angle of a spy thriller where it feels like he's a great player to have in this type of story. Unfortunately, Ross kind of gets forgotten about for most of the narrative, and you only get like tiny scenes of him in between where he has to deliver information to the Wakandans and also cover his butt with the CIA, especially since like we get a lot more scenes with, I don't know how big of a spoiler this will be, but Julia Louis-Dreyfus turns up again as Valentina, who you might remember. She was at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and she was at the end of Black Widow, and she's in this as well in a few scenes. But if you're hoping for a bigger divulgement of her character or what she's doing exactly, you won't get much of that. Like, they reveal a little bit more of her personal history, but like only a tiny chunk. Like, it feels like we're only getting little bits and pieces of her here and there. Not to mention, Ross's story just kind of like peters out, where he practically, like, aside from like divulging information, he's mostly like, distant from everything going on with Wakanda and Talokan. He's mostly just a contact, and it's like it almost kind of feels like he's in like a different movie that just kind of got spliced in, because like on one hand you do have this very grand fantasy epic about loss and legacy, and then on the other side you got a spy thriller which it feels like Ross would be a better fit for, and you don't get as much of him. He doesn't play that much of a role here. I will say though, we do get a lot more of Winston Duke in the role of M'Baku, the warrior, and with his like group of warriors like the Howl, and he knows how to seal a scene. Like, Winston Duke has always been a great actor, and like here he's given a lot more to work with. So I'm glad that if any of the returning characters are going to get more screen time and stuff to do, I'm glad it's him. It would have been a little bit nice to expand on Lupita Nyong'o's character of Nakia, who's a little bit absent from the film, only for a little bit, just because like it feels like she does play a heavier emotional role in the second half of the film. I would have liked a little bit with her, but for the scenes we do get with her, they're kind of perfect. And I guess I should kind of preference this film with like the tone, because this felt like a much different type of film when you compare it to everything else within phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, and I know that this has kind of always been like the big draw of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that they always have different types of films. Like when we had Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, we got a horror film. When we got I guess with Thor, we got a little bit like of a fantasy sci-fi element. And here we definitely have like a fantasy war kingdom type story about like kings and queens and princesses and stuff like that. And it definitely does, like, it feels like it has the similar beats as Black Panther, especially when you see Shuri kind of like, maneuver her way up to the throne and kind of like learn her lessons the hard way. Like, you're definitely going to see a lot of parallels between what T'Challa went through in Black Panther and what Shuri goes through in Wakanda Forever. And in some aspects, some people might find that repetitive, but I actually kind of found it interesting how Shuri's ascension was much more rocky. Like, it felt like T'Challa had to challenge the kingdom, and here it feels like Shuri has to challenge herself. Like, I don't want to give there is like an interesting twist on what happens on a certain ceremony that has to go on with the Black Panther. You get to see that again in Wakanda Forever, but it has like a much different meaning and a much more like gut punch of a scene, just with like the way it's set up and what it implies and the character that they reveal for that moment. It creates this much more rockier road for like Shuri to build herself up, which actually makes her hero's journey a lot more interesting, with her trying to ascend to power but also realize that she has to find a better way to lead, instead of just, challenging, like the structures to, like, become a ruler. Here she is, like, actually being in the control of a ruler and trying to figure out not to make the same mistakes as before. And just like everyone, I think, does a really good job with their performances here, especially like I know like this is a crowded cast that barely anyone has a lot of time to get to see them. But for like the scenes they do have, like they're very trimmed, they're very focused. For the more emotional scenes, there were, like, to be fair, there are a few scenes where it feels like they were cutting a little bit quick. But I mean, this film's almost 3 hours, so I mean you would have to like dice it up a little bit here and there. But the biggest thing I want to focus on is just the whole tone of the film. It definitely has an emotional resonance where it feels like it's trying to take itself much more seriously. Like there are a few jokes here and there, but they're kind of like, as they come jokes. There's never a moment where it feels like someone's trying way too hard to make a joke land, or they're just throwing quips at the wall as much as they can. It always feels like there's like a decent moment. It's like, okay, here's a little moment where you can balance it out with a little bit of humor and then get back to the more like serious problem here of like warring kingdoms. So like it takes itself seriously, but not too seriously. Like if the one thing you've been desiring from Phase 4 was a film that took itself a lot more seriously, which I don't know why you would, with all like the weird characters that are in the MCU. This is definitely that film, which is saying a lot for a Marvel movie where you have Namor, a character who he's pronounced Namor in the film, but I've always said Namor for some reason. Who, especially with Namor in the film, he has wings on his feet. And yet, like, that's one of the cool things about like Marvel films and like with Star Wars films, is that they always have these weird elements, but they're told in such a way where you can buy into the weirdness. And I think that definitely works with this film. And like the big thing, I don't know how much of a spoiler this is, but I've kind of been getting tired of like of mid-credit scenes, just because like I always feel like they act more like commercials and teases, like, what's going to happen in the next film, like what villain are they going to fight next, or what hero is going to come and work with this bigger ensemble. And there's nothing like that in Wakanda Forever. There is a mid-credit scene, but it's actually a pretty emotionally powerful and perfect way to conclude the film, that it's actually probably one of my favorite mid-credit scenes, just because it doesn't feel like a tease. Like it definitely gives you like hope for like, what's going to happen next with Wakanda and whatever Marvel film will address it next. But it doesn't feel like it's cheap. It feels like there was a reason for that scene to be there, and that it wasn't just, it didn't feel like it was just shoved in there, by Marvel Studios to sell the next film. Like, I mean, like, it should be enough that at the end of the film they just say, yes, Black Panther will return in whatever other project we do. So it's very, like, I think this film, like, it's not as good as 2018's Black Panther, and I think that's only because there's a little bit too much going on. It definitely didn't need to be almost 3 hours long for the story it's trying to tell here. But for the majority of the beats that it's trying to hit here, I feel like it really hits home in a lot of scenes, especially when it wants to pay tribute to Chadwick Boseman by the end. I feel like it did it in an actual tasteful way, rather than just being like a simple, like, in memory of Chadwick Boseman, or having the Marvel Studios logo just show nothing but Black Panther clips, which the film, it does all that, but it realizes it's not enough. It realizes it needs to weave T'Challa into the story to make it feel like there is a sense of loss and there is a sense of moving on. And for trying to traverse that kind of like rocky road for this type of film, I think Coogler actually does an exceptional job. And even with as messy as it is at times in this film, like, and definitely, like, there's definitely a lot of CGI, especially with like the Talakoans with like their blue skin, and they use like whales to transport themselves all over the ocean, and you have this very chaotic naval battle with like lots of CGI going on here. for all that messiness, I feel like the bigger story here never loses focus, and it's and just like it works so well for like like the emotional resonance that you want out of this story, with warring kingdoms and fantasy creatures and divided tribes and lineages, and coming to terms with loss and rising to power and taking on the throne. All these aspects work so well, and just Coogler's direction is just spot on, with like just great sets, a perfect soundtrack, and a wonderfully like just great Afrofuturism in general. So it's not as good as Black Panther, but it's still, I think, for this type of sequel, it's pretty damn stellar. So yeah, really loved Black Panther Forever. Oh my god. Condo's 3 hours. It is 3 hours. It is pretty long. If you're willing to stick with it, it actually works. It's just, it could have definitely trimmed that down. So yeah, oh god, I don't have the ability to block this stuff out in the chat. I'm trying to get that stuff. While I do that, should be noted here that yeah, Wakanda Forever is going to be in theaters this weekend. I think it looks like it's going to. I think it's definitely heading for a big weekend. I mean, why wouldn't it? Black Panther itself was like a huge $1 billion film, so why not? It'll definitely be a success. I don't think anyone's thinking it's gonna bomb, unless people are just lying to you. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely like, and I think it's mostly just because people have been like underwhelmed with Phase 4. But I think Wakanda Forever is definitely like my favorite entry of Phase 4. As messy as it is, I feel like, cause I feel like a lot of people are gonna feel it's bloated and everything. But give it time, and I think when people like think back on this film, they're probably gonna look back on it a lot more fondly. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Spider-Man No Way Home, and I dug aspects of Multiverse of Madness, but I think on like a grander scale, I think I'm actually gonna like love Wakanda Forever more over time. So it's definitely a solid follow up. All right. I did not. Okay, good. I haven't gotten used to moderating comments on this, so sorry for all that. Okay, let's see. What are we going to review next? Probably something that I don't want to throw my voice out over. How about the Banshees of Inisherin? There we go. Let's bounce it out with a little. Not big on comic book movies. Let's get something a little more humanist here, All right, let me get my notes up here so I can pronounce all these Irish names correctly. All right, and here we go in 3, 2, 1. So the Banshees of Inisherin is simultaneously the saddest and probably one of the funniest films that I've seen this year. It's directed by Martin McDonagh, and it takes place on a Irish Isle in the 1920s. And it's pretty like it's a beautiful place. This little island. It's it's got its rain here and there, but it's got vast open vistas, and it's got like a very close knit community, and everyone has like there's farms, and there's a nice little pub. But it's a boring island. It's plagued with a boredom where there's not much going on there, and people kind of like struggle to find something to do. And in particular, a folk musician by the name of Colm, played by Brendan Gleeson, is finding himself just in a bit of an existential crisis. Like life has just become mundane. It's become the same thing day after day, just a routine that he feels like is going nowhere, and realizes that I've been doing this for so long that eventually I'm going to die, and I'm not going to have done anything with my life. So Colm makes a very rash decision to end his friendship with his best friend Pedrick, played by Colin Farrell, so that he can compose what he feel will be like his life's work of like the ultimate folk song. Basically, he wants immortality. He wants to like leave a dent in this world and feels like he wasn't just that guy that a few people knew who went to like the the pub every now and then and just hung out in his house by the sea and did nothing for his entire life. And so Colm just makes the blunt decision. He doesn't even explain this to Pedrick. He just cuts him off. He just says, "Look, I want our friendship done. Just it's done. Just stay away from me. That's all I'm saying." Doesn't explain himself because he doesn't feel that Pedrick could understand his problem, and it's mostly because Pedrick is, to put it lightly, he's simple. He can't understand like existential crises. He's not that well read. He doesn't understand certain terms like touche, and he's not familiar with Mozart. So it feels like he's a difficult person to talk to with these very troubling subjects, where Colm feels that even with like certain figures he can't quite be honest with how he feels, just because the whole community is so close knit that it feels like word gets around fast and everyone's going to start gossiping about him. So Colm just keeps his distance. He's just like, you know what, screw it, just everyone who doesn't matter and isn't going to help me with my song can just stay away. And of course, Pedrick, because, this was his best friend, and, they had a great routine where they would hang out at the pub every day at 2, and they'd go have pints and hang out and just chat and do as what Pedrick referred to as just, being normal. And that's something that Colm can't have in his life anymore. And this is something that Pedrick doesn't want to accept, mostly because, because it's change for his life. And change seems like it's going to be bad for him, especially since he's grown used to this life of living with his sister Slaban, I believe I'm pronouncing it. Saiban, played by Kerry Condon, and Kerry Condon. Bad with pronouncing names, and his sister is basically like, yeah, I don't think there's anything more I can do on this island, so I'm going to kind of like take off and go for like a better job elsewhere. So Pedrick is going to have to get used to living on his own. And even worse, Pedrick is going to have to get used to having a new friend, which is the young kid called Dominic, played by Barry Coigun. I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. You might remember from The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and his little bit role in the Batman. Here he plays this very eccentric and very odd, horny young man who's basically, that's the best way to put it. Like, this is a kid who hangs out, like, he does nothing but talk about women. Like, he gets really creepy at the pub. He asks Pedrick very, like, weird questions, like, hey, have you ever seen your sister naked or anything? And just as he has no grander ambition in his life other than just to, like, maybe date Pedrick's sister and drink. And that's it. That's all he has going for in his life. So this is definitely, like, it's like I said, equal parts sad and humorous. Like, it's humorous because these characters do such absurd things and then try to find ways to deal with these problems that they're not equipped to handle. And it's funny in a dry sort of way, just, watching them kind of like stumble over their own words and try to, find better ways to connect with people when they can't. And then it's sad when you realize that, yeah, it's, this is going to go into some dark places when, these people can't deal with like dullness and the mundanity of life. And it just rips them up inside, and just, it literally hurts them. And this is mostly because, at one point in the film, Colm basically gets tired of Pedrick, like, coming into his life and trying to poke around and never leaving him alone. That Colm just says, look, if you bother me again, I'm going to take my shears and I'm going to cut off a finger for every day that you don't leave me alone. And just, he threatens with that and then just leaves. And it's like, oh man, that sounds pretty grim. And of course, everyone jokes about it, like, oh, I don't think he'll really do it. Why would he do that? He's a fiddle player. How's he going to play his fiddle if he cuts off all his fingers? What's he going to do? He's not going to do it. And you kind of laugh, like, oh, you think he's gonna do it. There's even a great moment in the trailer where after he threatens to do it, like the dog that he lives with takes the shears in his mouth and kind of like drags them out of the house. It's kind of like it's a very like cute moment. You're like, oh, that's cute. The dog doesn't want him to hurt himself, so maybe Colm won't do it. So you laugh at that, and then your laugh slowly fades when you realize, oh, Colm is serious. And I'm not going to reveal how many times he does this, but let's just say more than you would expect. So this goes into some pretty dark places. Some pretty dark and very emotionally sad places, but like understandable levels of like sad where you're kind of teetering between like laughing and just like at the point of like tears in this film. There's a perfect moment where when Patrick and Cole meet on the beach and their relationship is at its rockiest, and Patrick, he has nothing. He does not know what to say to him in this moment to convince Colm that they should be friends and that they should, like, mend their ways. And he just kind of like stumbles over his own words, just like, hey, have you written any good songs lately? And Colm's like, what? Patrick's like, is music good? And Colm's like, what? What's wrong with you? And you laugh so much at this, like watching Colin Farrell like trip over his own words and stumble, and you want to like cry at the same time, because this is a guy who, he's watching his friendship crumble and he doesn't know how to put all the pieces back together, and just kind of like watching him try to fix like this broken sandcastle of his relationships, and it keeps crumbling in the sand. Like, it's pathetic and you want to laugh at it, but at the same time, it's just going to get worse for this guy. Like, life is just going to get darker. He does some rash things. Like, it gets incredibly like vicious with like the revenge by the end of this film, that you're almost like worried that like these characters are going to kill themselves, let alone like come to terms with their boredom and like their existence in life. So like it's a little bit of like, like some pitying going on, but also like some empathy, because there's a part of you that recognizes that, you identify a little bit with like, this creeping fear of like, that you won't mean anything once you've left this world, and that you won't have a greater impact. And as with like a lot of like dark humor that touches on like the existentialism, you kind of got to laugh at that just to feel a little bit alive. So it's this kind of like wonderful roller coaster of emotions, just trying to explore the depressing nature of like feeling like there's nothing present for you in life and that you're going nowhere, and at the same time just laughing at the idea of just struggling to go somewhere with it, just because there's so much funny dialogue between Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, which, if you've seen their other films, like, like In Bruges and stuff like that, they have great chemistry, and they have pitch perfect chemistry here, where they walk that perfect line between drama and humor, that you can't help but love. Like, there's like Patrick tries to seem intelligent by saying like, what, it takes two to tango, Colm. And Colm just says like, I don't want to tango with you, Patrick. Patrick's like, but you dance with your dog. Why won't you dance with me? It's silly, it's absurd, but it's like it's coming from a genuine place that you really do feel for these characters, and that you feel sad, especially with how this boredom becomes a disease that infects this entire community. So yeah, it's a very odd film. Like it's a hard film to recommend, because like you don't quite want to recommend it as a comedy, because you will laugh at it, but you're gonna feel like very, very sad by the end of it. And you don't quite want to recommend it as like, a very, like a distinguished like period piece drama, because it does have a little bit too much fun with that era and the absurdities that happen with it. Especially with a lot of like the dark humor they really push into this film. So I guess, yeah, it's just, if you like if you like your drama extremely sad and touches on like existential dread, and if you like your humor very, very dark and dry with like a little bit of wryness thrown into the mix, this is just a perfect cocktail of a film. It's one of my favorites of the year so far. Definitely up there. So the Banshees of Inisherin, I believe it had like a limited release last month, and it should be expanding more into theaters this weekend. So don't miss this film. Go see it if you can. And actually, while I was just saying that, I just realized there was another film I wanted to cover that I did see, but I'm gonna put it on here. So yeah, that should be playing in theaters this weekend. I think it'll definitely be up for Oscar consideration. So if you're trying to find films that you want to watch before the end of the year to have on your Oscar watch list, this is definitely one that you should be watching. It is. I don't know if it might get nominated for Best Picture. It's definitely going to get nominated for Best Actor. It will probably be Colin Farrell, but it could be Brendan Gleeson. They could definitely push for both. Both of them are very strong in this film that I feel like you could push them. I feel like Barry Koenig might actually be a good fit for like Best Supporting Actor too. So yeah, if you're one of those like me who loves to watch for like award season and keep track of everything, that should be at the top of your list if it isn't already. It's definitely going to be on the best of the year list. All right. So let's go to another odd mixture that actually really works. Going to be covering Bone and All from Luca Guadagnino. Let me get my notes up here. All right. And 3, 2, 1. So Bones and All is the new film from Luca Guadagnino. And if you liked... If you like when Luca does horror, you'll probably like this film. And I think this film is a great testament to just how great horror films have been in 2022, just because we've gotten so many different kinds of horror films, and now it feels like we're actually getting like a horror film that could actually make a play for a lot of awards. Just because, yeah, for one, it's Luca. But and you've got some big name talent in this film as well that could be awards worthy. But it's a film all about eating people. Well, more or less. It's definitely, it's a film about, eating people, and it's got some pretty gruesome and violent and bloody scenes. But it's also a very heartfelt road trip movie, if you can believe that. And it surprisingly works for a little bit of its freewheeling nature. It actually hits pretty well. So the story is about Marin, played by Taylor Russell. And she's kind of growing up knowing that she's not like other people. Specifically because apparently since she's been very, very young, she has been eating people. She gets attracted to flesh and she just starts sinking her teeth into people. And it feels like one of those things that she can't help. That it's just, it's something she can't control, that she's terrified of. She has a father who tries to like protect her and, do the right thing for her. But that means that they have to do a lot of running. They have to leave a community if, she gets too carried away. They have to hide dead bodies. And it becomes too much for this dad. This dad realizes he can't do much more for her. And at one point just decides to let her find herself. Just let her go off on her own and try to figure out what to do. Since she turns 18, just lets her loose. So Marin decides to, since she never really knew her mother, decides to seek her out and see if she can uncover the history of why she is a bit of a cannibal. And on her road trip, it turns out to be a very enlightening road trip because she discovers that she's not the only one. There are other people who like to eat people. One of the first people she meets is Sully, played by Mark Rylance. And since Mark Rylance is pretty old, Sully's been doing this a long enough time that he feels like he might have some sagely advice. The problem is, Sully has been at this for so long and has gotten so used to it that he basically doesn't feel much of anything. Like he's just like, okay, well, you gotta eat, hey, I know this house up the street, you want to eat some people with me? It's cool. I know you want to eat, and I've gotten used to it. And Marin quickly realizes that, yeah, I can't, I don't know if I can hang around this Sully guy. I think he's too creepy, especially since he keeps mementos of the people he kills, and I'm not going to reveal which ones just because the scene where he reveals it is pretty creepy, and it's very early on. So Marin is very much afraid of what she'll become and can see that within Sully, a guy who's been at this a long time. But on the other hand, she meets Lee, played by Timothy Chalamet, and Lee is fairly close to Marin in age, so and he's gotten a little bit used to it. So Marin feels like, oh, maybe we can connect. Maybe he can like show me a little bit of the ropes, and maybe I don't have to be alone. Because here's Lee, another guy who has this craving for human flesh the same way I do, and he's it feels like he's been on the road long enough. He knows the deal. I'll hang out with him, and then hey, one thing leads to another, and you're two cannibals in love. And yeah, it's and as silly as that sounds, and as ridiculous as this could be, it actually gets pretty sweet. Like it touches on these two characters who have this fear of themselves, where they feel like they want to do the right thing and they don't want to deny this part of themselves, but also try to have like a little, trying to find like whatever little humanity they have left in themselves, that they can explore to feel like they can still have a life together. Which is both, it's very charming in a few scenes, but also very like tragic, because you kind of realize that, this life of eating people and hiding dead bodies is, it's going to go to some dark places, and it might not end the way that you like. And without giving too much away, it goes into some pretty dark territory here. Like there's people they target who they feel like they might have deserved it, and they don't have any kinship, and they end up making big mistakes, and it kind of like haunts them. And I love how like the film is almost kind of like, it's definitely diced up like a road trip film. Like we do have like little title cards between like each state that they go to, and we do get little flashes of the past. Like Marin slowly starts to remember more of what it was like growing up, and how she was haunted by these memories that she feels like that she was trying to like shut out. And there's a very darkly sad moment when she finally gets to her mother and kind of realizes that there's not much that she can do. Like there's barely any comfort for her once she finally makes this discovery of like where she came from and who raised her, and how they basically couldn't raise her. So there's all these like these fears that course through both Marin and Lee that become so sad that you find yourself doing what seems like the impossible, which is caring for these cannibals who just want to feel like they're not alone. Like even with like Sully, for as weird and creepy as he becomes, like he keeps coming back into the picture, even for as bizarre as he is, you kind of understand how he got to this state by feeling like he has nothing, and that he always had to keep his head low, and that he always had to keep this part of himself away from other people, and that he couldn't be his real self around others. And like part of me, like I like this allegory for not being comfortable with yourself, and like how you act the way that you are. I feel like it might be, and depending on how you view this film and what you might equate it to, I feel like it might have a little bit of like mixed messaging towards the end of the film. At the same time, though, I do like that the film isn't afraid to take some chances and go to some shocking areas that you wouldn't expect this film to go to. Like very, very, very sexual places, very gory places, like and a combination of both. Without giving too much away, there's a climax that's equal parts romantic and sad as it is gory and bloody and vicious. And just having it all swirl together by the end there, it feels so refreshing to have like a film like that isn't afraid to experiment with that. And I'm so glad that Luca Guadagnino is willing to go through with that with this type of story, which feels like, in different hands, it feels like this type of film could have been like a young adult romance that was far too simple. That definitely leaned into like the area of Twilight, made it very serviceable to like mainstream audiences. And here it almost kind of feels like it's like, I don't quite want to say like it's challenging, like it has like this kind of like Wim Wenders type feel to it, but kind of like almost kind of like I was thinking a little bit like kind of like with like Jim Jarmusch's stuff with like Broken Flowers, a little bit on that angle, although like not as much with like the dry humor. There's a wee bit of humor here and there, but not a whole lot. It's mostly just a pretty dark horror film throughout, with great romance thrown in as well. The performances are just like, I mean, come on, you got Timothée Chalamet, you got Mark Rylance, Taylor Russell also knocks us out of the park as well. You even have like some performances from like David Gordon Green and Chloe Shiving who are just amazing in this film as well. Pitch perfect performances there. You really do get to like know and love like Mirren and Lee, and they're Taylor and Timothy have a really good chemistry for this type of film, and I feel like that's like the most crucial thing. If this is going to be a romance, you got to feel like these two characters connect. And you feel that through every scene where like they have like their fights over, where they want to go in life, where they have their splits, where they connect sexually, where they feel like they're together and they can trust each other. And just the tiny moments of joy that they take on this road trip here. So yeah, it's definitely like, if in case it needs to be said, this is definitely not a film for the faint of heart. If blood and guts is not your deal, there's a lot of blood and guts here, a lot. So just like be forewarned. But if you're willing to go that route, and if you're a bit of a horror connoisseur and you want you want to feel like there's more romance than just like the quirky and silly, like we kissed each other while we were murdering this dude, that like more than that, something that's actually like a meaningful romance. Luca gets the job done here just so well, with amazing performances and a great atmosphere too, and just like great editing as well. Like there's a lot of sequences where it feels like they could linger and meander too long on like a point, and they don't. They chop it up perfectly here. That there's rarely a moment where you're not engaged and not interested and intrigued to see where this couple goes next, and who will end up as their next dinner. So it's a pretty wonderful film about two people who fall in love and eat people. Just in case that wasn't clear. So Bones and All should be opening next weekend. I think it's going to be in some theaters around the country this weekend. It might be in like limited release in a few places, but I believe it's going to open wide next week. So check out some great. I think this horror is definitely going to be up for a few awards as well, which is great because I feel like Guadagnino got robbed with his version of Suspiria. Because I love, I know, some people are like, I still love the original, and I do have parts of the original I love, but Luca's film is just so great. I know it's controversial, but I actually love, I actually love Luca's version of Suspiria more than Argento's. I know that's sacrilege. I know everyone loves everything that Argento does, and to a degree, I do too. But you got to take a film for what it is, and for what Luca did with Suspiria, it works. All right. I don't want to throw my voice too much out for I will for the last film, but not for this one. I'm gonna get to something simpler here, just because I don't want to throw my voice out of me, because the last one I'm going to review is the Weird Al film, and I am going to throw my voice out for that probably. So let me get the notes up here for Aftersun, which I believe came out in very limited release in theaters. So this is very much a smaller film. So I'm going to just briefly cover it here, just because I feel like I don't want this film to get lost. I think this is definitely one of those films that is so low on the radar. It came out very late last month in a few theaters, and it's just now, I think, going on to Mubi. So I don't want this to get lost here. So I'm doing my due diligence here to cover smaller films. So it's not just all the blockbusters, all right? So let me get my notes up here. Okay. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So After Sun is a film that's all about kind of like growing up, about fatherhood, about adolescence, and kind of preserving that moment in time. Like, this is a film it's a little bit difficult to talk about. It's one of those things where it's like, once you see it, you know what it's trying to say, and if you're in like, if you've experienced this level of kind of like, being a parent or being, or growing up with like a parent who's very concerned, it's going to hit you in the gut, like hard. It's a film that basically, it wants to preserve like what feels like the perfect moment between a father and daughter. So like the father is Callum, played by Paul Mescal, and the daughter is Sophie, played by Frankie Corio. So Sophie is 11 years old, and she's going off on a vacation with her father. And she videotapes it so they can remember it and basically preserve this one vacation that will be like a major turning point for Sophie. Like, she's 11 years old, so a lot of new things are happening. She's hanging out with older kids. She's starting to notice boys more. She feels like she wants to have more independence. She's doing a lot more on her own, and it's something that Callum is like struggling to like deal with. He's not like a helicopter parent. Like, he's not going to go down that embarrassing route saying like, you're too young to do any of this stuff. He realizes that he's going to have to let go if he wants to, be a better parent. Like, he realizes he's got to keep a little bit of a distance. And there's this kind of like, there's like this quiet sadness to him where you can tell like he has like a troubled history, and that he can't really, like, it feels like the only thing going right for him in his life is Sophie. Like, everything in his life is devoted to his daughter, and it feels like that part of his life is coming to a close, and that he's not going to be able to move on from that. And it's very like, it's a very slow moving film, but I feel like it perfectly hits on this aspect of feeling like this is probably going to be the greatest moment that you'll have as a parent, and it's going to be over before you know it. So, and like, you can do your best to preserve it, but it's going to be gone. Because like the whole film is kind of like framed through this lens of kind of like looking back on the footage. Like, it's not strictly a found footage type of film. There are some framing devices where it kind of seems like it is, but it does keep you in the moment, and I think it helps to not have this be a found footage film, because then it feels like it doesn't touch on the more like quieter, awkward aspects that wouldn't be filmed during a vacation. And it's interesting to see, how Sophie kind of inserts her independence here, and it's in small ways and big ways as well. So like, it's in small ways in the fact that at one point Callum kind of forgets about Sophie and she gets locked out of the room. And so Sophie takes the initiative and like goes to the lobby and gets the key for the hotel room, comes up, and Callum's like, "Oh, how'd you get the key?" It's like, "Oh, I just went to the desk clerk and told him my name, and then I was registered in the room and gave me the key. I came up." And Callum's like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's something you can do. It's something we have to get used to, but yeah, it's something you could do. And then there's other little moments, just like her deciding that she wants to do karaoke, and Callum saying, no, don't do karaoke. Okay, you're doing karaoke. Okay, that's what you're doing. And there's this very like quiet, like, like cry of like, I don't want you to grow up too fast. Stay little. And at the same time, just as this open admittance of like, okay, I realize that you got to move on, and I think it's perfectly encapsulated with how Sophie kind of admits to how she's become interested in boys, and another boy her same age she ends up having a little bit of a kiss with, and she admits this to Callum. Basically, it's like, "Hey, Dad, I kissed this boy," and Callum's like, "Oh, well, you're the same age, so that's okay, right? Yeah, that's fine." And then of course later he'll cry about it, and it won't be in like a very humorous way, but it'll it does evoke this sense that will be revealed later that yes, Callum did have a little bit of a troubled childhood, not a not like a chaotic childhood, but like definitely one where it feels like that he was devalued and that his parents kind of made the wrong mistakes, somewhat innocently. Like they definitely did like the wrong things that kind of affected him, but in a manner that felt like mistakes. And these are mistakes that Callum feels like this is something that that he wants to correct and that he wants to be a good parent, even though it feels like it's hard. So the film is like it's slow paced and there's a lot of very like small quiet moments. There's a lot of like almost kind of like, as weird as it sounds, kind of like routine aspects that you would expect of a vacation, like little trips here and going to the arcade and like hanging out at like an outdoor event and stuff like that. That set like the perfect tone for just like this easygoing nature, where there are moments where just like Callum and Sophie will just relax and bask in the moment, not realizing that that this that it's not going to be like this forever. That they're they're going to grow up and they're probably going to grow apart, and it's a sad feeling that Callum just keeps trying to like fight off, and it's a very it's I guess like by the end of the film, like especially since like by the end the camera pulls back, like not just like in terms of like what it reveals at the start, but like it literally pulls back to reveal like Sophie grown up and Callum kind of like moving on with his life. And there's this element of just like catharsis where it ends the film on like a sad note, but also like a moment of contentment, realizing that time passes us by, you grow up, people who you once knew are going to be different. You might grow apart, you might grow together, but you're going to have to keep going. And that's just the way life is. You can still have your memories. You can still have them preserved through either, video or, what you've experienced in your mind and the fond memories that you have of people and family along the way. But that, it's ultimately just going to be the past, and it's sad, but at the same time, it's also this kind of like almost like tiny bits of like of joy that come about with it, because it's a weird feeling to describe. Like it's one of those things where it's like you're watching this progression happen, and it's something that that's going to happen, and that it's good for that person to grow up, but at the same time you realize that it's still really sad to watch this happen too. Even though it's not a terrible thing, it's a part of life. It's something that you got to accept. You want to assert some control over it, but you got to realize your control is limited. There's so much you can do. And for touching on this very, like, honestly, like, tearful aspect of time and growing up, I really, really loved After Sun. And I think, like writer and director Charlotte Webb does a great job here. This is a fantastic, quietly sad film, and don't miss this film. It's definitely gonna get glazed over, even though it's like I believe it's distributed by A24, but there's always like bigger A24 films that come out. So this is definitely one of my favorite quiet dramas of 2022. So yeah, After Sun is currently playing on Mubi, and I believe you can find it. I don't know if it might be playing in some theaters. I think it's still playing in some theaters here and there, so go check it out if you can. Okay, so last film. So here is our last film here. Let's bring it up. Okay. This is a big one. All right. So let's get the notes up here. So I get the huge cast list for this film. All right, and we'll review Weird, the Al Yankovic story. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. So Weird. The Al Yankovic story is the 100% truthful biopic on Weird Al. And by truthful, I mean not at all. Like it was a great thing to watch how people discovered like the trailer here, because the film From Funny or Die is based on an actual trailer that they originally made, which wanted to depict the life of Weird Al as like a serious drama. Yeah, in a funny way. They did this trailer years ago as a joke, but then they expanded on it and said, well, hey, what if let's just do a full, like, parody film where we try to, like, be serious, like, make it like a serious biopic, but have, like, this kind of, like, walk hard Dewey Cox angle to it, by exaggerating everything that mocks convention and just tells, like, flat out lies about Weird Al's life, and do it in such, like, a great way. And on that angle, like, if you can buy into that joke of, like, how absurd it takes itself, this is definitely one of the funniest films of the year, like, by a mile. And it's like, it starts with, like, the casting. You have, like, after they divulge, like, the history of Al's upbringing, in which apparently polka parties were illegal and his dad hated accordions and all that. The adult version of Al Yankovic is played by Daniel Radcliffe, who is, like, not a good choice to play Weird Al, but for this film, where it tries to make him into, like, a serious musical icon, it's perfect casting. It is the perfect casting, because it does not fit to have him play Weird Al as kind of this like lanky but semi-ripped guy, and not even try to do the voice. Like, anytime he sings, like, it's just Weird Al singing and not actually Radcliffe. Like, they don't even try to get him to, like, perfect the Weird Al look here. Where other musical biopics will struggle to find the right actor for the part and get him into character and try to, like, memorize, like, the lyrics and the performance and, like, the stage presence, Radcliffe does none of that. They make him a completely different character here, and it works. Like, everything that they build up in this film, it's just brilliant. Like, they try to make it so, like, all Al's parody songs had to come from, like, some great, like, eureka moment. Like, he would hear My Sharona on the radio and stare at, like, a package of bologna, and then slowly connect the two, like, wait, yes, here it comes. Here comes the song. And yeah, just, like, the whole film builds up like that, where it spins more and more ridiculous yarns about Weird Al's life that are just so absurd. And the casting all around is just great here. Like, Evan Rachel Wood plays Madonna, who tries to, like, seduce Al into making a parody of his songs. And she definitely owns this role. It's debatable if she even inhabits aspects of Madonna, but she makes this role her own. Same thing for Rainn Wilson as Dr. Demento. It feels like Rainn Wilson's a little bit of, like, a better fit here. Although it is funny that make Dr. Demento this kind of, like, this authority on, like, parody music and niche entertainment, especially when you have this great amusing moment where he invites Weird Al to to this kind of, like, celebrity party of all these niche entertainers, like Tiny Tim and Pee Wee Herman and Salvador Dali and Divine and all these other great figures, with actors who are debatable whether or not they can fit the role. Like, Jack Black as Wolfman Jack is... Here's the great thing about this film. It doesn't matter if these actors fit these roles. Because they're such absurd, exaggerated versions of all these celebrities that it works perfectly for this type of absurd comedy. Especially when you have Weird Al himself playing a record executive who basically looks down on Radcliffe's Weird Al here. And there's a perfect moment where, like, his brother, played by Will Forte, is talking down to Weird Al and saying that you are, like, the worst human being ever and you will never go anywhere in life. And Weird Al playing the record executive is just kind of like, okay, tone it down a bit. Can you tone it down? um, just all around, like you have like such a perfect comedic ensemble here. Even for like small bit roles, like Thomas Lennon as an accordion salesman fits this role well. Toby Huss, who you might remember, he's done voices on like King of the Hill. He's been like on Adventures of Pete and Pete. Is just owns this role as like Al's father who works at the factory, which he never explains what they make at the factory. And Huss has always had like this great comedic timing with his voice here, and here it's definitely at its apex. He's perfectly suited for this type of like working man role. And just small little roles here and there that you don't expect, like Lin Manuel Miranda as an ER doctor in just one scene, and and just all the little cameos you have here, and just like it's hard to talk about this film without just talking about all the funny aspects of it, but it's just if you can go along with it, because it doesn't just lean into one joke. It leans heavy into the absurdity of like contorting Al Yankovic's story as much as possible, so it doesn't just look like the boring version of him just like making funny songs. Then he comes up in the world, then he ends up making more funny songs, because you get the feeling like when Weird Al finally does die, if they do make like the Lifetime movie about him, it feels like they're gonna have to exaggerate a lot if they want drama, or it's just going to be a fairly boring film that they're going to have to like be a little bit more playful with, to try to find something there. So instead of waiting for that, why not just let Weird Al, who co-wrote the film, why not just let him take the reins and just make like a ridiculous version of himself? And I love the areas that it goes. Like, it doesn't just go into mocking musical biopic tropes and cliches. It does a lot of that, but then it goes into weirder areas, like suggesting that Weird Al's songs into the 1980s were never parodies. They were all original songs, and just celebrities all copied him. It also contorts the timeline too, but by having him come up with songs much earlier than possible. Like at one point, he comes up with Gangster's Paradise. Amish Paradise. Gotta remember that. He comes up with Amish Paradise with a really ridiculous backstory that you can't help but love about how he came up with this as an original song. But they make him come up with, apparently in the 1980s, he comes up with this. And then, out of nowhere, the film just turns into an action film where Al has to go stop a drug cartel. Which is, it comes out of nowhere, and it made me laugh so hard because you don't expect it out of this type of film, but it's played up so hard for like the John Wick aspect of him making Al into this one-man army, that it's so ridiculous you can't help but like fall over laughing at it. And by the time you get to the end of the film, the major event that closes out the film is just so bizarre that that it basically, without giving too much away if you haven't seen it yet, Weird Al basically stages his death by the end of the film. And it's ridiculous, and then like the kind of like weirdly somber ending they place on it is so it's so I'm running out of like superlatives and stuff to call this film funny, but it's just, I could not stop laughing by the end of this film. And it's just amazing like how much of this joke keeps going, and how it just keeps getting funnier as it keeps going on. Like, you would think the bit would run out of steam by like the second act of trying to say like, oh, okay, they're contorting this truth, and okay, this really didn't happen. Al didn't make out with Madonna, and he didn't like put a cigarette out in someone's hand. He never did any of this stuff. But then just like make the absurdity mount higher and higher. That even when you get to the end credits, you have an original song by Weird Al that closes out the film, which is perfect. It's just Al singing about how this film is now canon and everything in it is true, and we didn't make anything up, and everything was fact checked. And if you disagree, well, hey, shut up, you weren't there. So like, it's tough to like. I mean, it's tough to talk about this film further than just saying like it's funny, and I guess like that's the true hallmark of a comedy. Like, you know, like the best you can say is that, you know, like it's funny and if you laughed or not. And on that aspect, it's kind of easy to review it because I laughed a hell of a lot while watching this. But at the same time, the crux of the story and the jokes is just that it's all absurdity. It's all just contorting Weird Al's life so that barely any of it connects with the real life Al, which is perfect. It's wonderful, it's hilarious, and it's definitely one of the funniest films of the year. So Weird, the Al Yankovic story, is currently playing on Roku, which I'm kind of thankful that it's on there because Roku's free with ads. You just gotta sit through ads, and it's free if you have a Roku device. And even if you don't, I feel like I think you can just sign in to like the Roku website and watch through there. I haven't done it. I know you can log in through there, so you might be able to do through there. But yeah, I think it's only on Roku. I hope it will get a physical release where we get some deleted scenes and bloopers. I think Roku's providing that. I don't know if they have them all, but I really hope it gets physical release because this film deserves it. It definitely deserves it. So yeah, definitely one of the funniest films of the year. All right, so I think we covered we covered everything. Even a film that I thought we would not get, that I forgot about, and I'm glad I didn't. After Sun. So yeah, we are in the. For those who don't know, we are in the heart of festival and holiday blockbuster season. So we got a lot of films coming up here in the next few weeks. Like, if you just to give like a little bit of a preview here, I'll go over all the films that I'm seeing in the next month here. So within the next month, I'm going to be seeing The Menu, the film with Nicholas Hoult and Ralph Fiennes, Disney's new film Strange Worlds, their new animated film they're pushing out for Thanksgiving because it's Disney. They always have a Thanksgiving film out. You can't beat them. Thanksgiving is Disney time. I'll also be reviewing, what else? The Whale I'll be watching by the end of the month. I believe I have Spoiler Alert, which I believe is a drama. I believe that's coming towards the end of... where is that? I think that's towards the end of November, probably early December. And then, oh god, there's probably more that I'm forgetting. I know there's a few more that are forthcoming, stuff like Babylon. Oh, I completely forgot. The Fablesman, the Steven Spielberg film. That film I will be seeing later this month as well. So that's at least 6 films just in November. And that's not even everything. That's not even count like the stuff that's going to streaming. That's not counting like the other stuff that'll go in the theaters, not counting all the festival stuff. So this is a busy time. It's busy time. But it's a great time too. Because hey, it's you know, like usually the stuff that get picked up from festivals is usually the best stuff, and there's a lot of stuff I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to Babylon, the new oh god, what's it? Damien Chazelle, I think his name, the La La Land guy, his new film. I'm looking forward to that. I think there's a new Will Ferrell, Ryan Reynolds Christmas musical that I'm curious about. I don't know if it'll be good, but I'm curious about it. And just all the holiday... And then, of course, we'll review the expected holiday films like Avatar and... what else would be coming out? There's too much. If I'm being honest here, I'm being overwhelmed. I'm being overwhelmed by all these good movies. Okay, so I should probably get back to the grind. So, let's do a quick review then. All right. So, quick recap of the films we reviewed on today's stream. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. It is not as good as 2018's Black Panther. It is definitely overstuffed, and it's definitely a little messy. But for moving on from Chadwick Boseman, it's a very, very solid follow-up. And definitely, I think, like, here's the thing. It's a solid follow-up for Black Panther, but for Phase 4, I think it's definitely one of my favorite films of Phase 4. Definitely. So go check that out this weekend. The Banshees of Inisherin, very sad, very humorous, and surprisingly violent film about boredom on an Irish island in the 1920s. Trust me, this is a very exciting film. It sounds like since it's a film about boredom, it's going to be tiresome and slow-paced. I assure you, it's not. I was at the border of tears while I was laughing on this thing, so perfect mix of sadness and humor. Oh, real quick, yeah, Banshees of Inisherin will be opening wide this weekend. It might actually be in your theaters right now in some limited art house theaters, so go check it out. Bones and All from Luca Guadagnino. Perfect combination of road trip, romance, and body horror. Not even quite body horror, just gore. Just blood, guts, gore. Perfect combination of that. Wonderful performances by Taylor Russell, Timothy Chalamet, and Mark Rylance. They have amazing performances here. Go check that out. If you're still, if you're still in the mood for horror, and you want some horror in your festival films, this is the perfect opportunity to take advantage of that. Bones and All will be in theaters next weekend. Go check that out. Weird, the Al Yankovic story. Absurd biopic, definitely one of the funniest films of the year. Go check it out on Roku. There isn't much more I can say about that. It's just so goddamn funny. Go see the film, okay? And finally, After Sun, a small, quiet, and surprisingly tragic film about, growing up in adolescence and parenthood. It's a very small film, and it's definitely going to get washed over and get lost in like the shuffle of the festival and award season. But if you get a chance, if you're in the mood for something just a little bit somber, a little bit moving and emotional, go check out After Sun. It should be in a few theaters right now, and it's playing on the streaming service Mubi. So there you go. So let's see. Let's check when will we meet again? We'll meet again. Don't know where. Actually, I do know when now. So we'll see. Oh, when can we do this? Ooh, I think we might be able. I might do a stream on the week of Thanksgiving. I haven't picked a day yet, but I'll probably do it then, because by then I will have seen a few films. I'll have seen Disney's Strange World, and I think I'll be able to talk about it by then. I'll have seen The Menu, and I think I might see The Fabelman by then. So yeah. So join us in about 2 weeks. Not 2 weeks exactly, because that'll be Thanksgiving. I won't be streaming that day. So join us in about 2 weeks, where we will be reviewing The Menu, a class divide drama starring Ralph Fiennes and Nicholas Hoult. We'll be reviewing Disney's Strange Worlds, a new kind of like adventure fantasy from Disney that will be in theaters for Thanksgiving. And we will be reviewing The Fablesman, a new awards contender, which is the semi-autobiographical pick on Steven Spielberg's life, directed by Steven Spielberg. Like, it's kind of sort of Steven Spielberg's biography. Like, it has similarities, but he takes enough liberties where it's not just called the Spielberg movie, So we'll definitely review those 3 films. We might have some more. Depends on what comes in. Depends on which screeners I get to, because there's so much. But we definitely will recap in 2 weeks. So, might as well throw in the credits here. So, if you want to check out my written works, if you can't wait for the videos, I will have written reviews of all the stuff that I do on here. You can find them at movieswithmark.com. That's where most of them will be posted. You can check them out on filminquiry.com. Those are the ones that get picked up by Rotten Tomatoes. So if you want to see the ones that might get picked up by Rotten Tomatoes and maybe, one day get a pull quote on there, you can find them there. And you can also check on Twin Cities Geek, the local Minnesota writing collective that I write for. And I just forgot to mention something right at the end there. This weekend, on Saturday, I will be at Twin Cities Con in downtown Minneapolis. I basically, like, I was enticed to go there just because there's so many cool people that are going to be there, and it's a great event to cover for press coverage. But also because I wanted to meet Phil Lamar, the voice actor who's going to be there. Earlier this week, I actually did interview Phil Lamar with an interview that should be up on Twin Cities Geek, maybe either this week or next week sometime. But yeah, I'm going to be down there. There's a lot of great guests there. I believe Elijah Wood is going to be out there. There's going to be tons of great geeky guests out there. So yeah, if you're in downtown Minneapolis, you can stop on by. I mean, it's at the convention center, so it's going to be a crowded place there. But yeah, I'll be there along with a whole bunch of other geeks having fun. So yeah. Check out all my reviews on the websites I mentioned there. I'm on a few different social medias. I'm trying to connect, Mastodon? I'm trying to connect Mastodon on YouTube here. I haven't quite decided on which Mastodon account I want to use, but I'll find one. But yeah, I'm also on Twitter for however long that'll last. But you can also check me out on Patreon as well, where I have exclusive reviews and essays, as well as access to my new books. I'm writing one in Saturday Morning Cartoons, so you can read about that as it comes out. I just recently wrote about the Flintstones, which is quite extensive, so there's a lot there. But yeah, all these reviews that I did here will be posted on YouTube by next week. So yeah, until then, I'll see you in 2 weeks probably. So have a good one.